Hello and welcome to yet another exciting edition of Plank of the Week. And here's the plank. I've got with me today two stalwarts of the business that we are in, which is of course talking for a living. Emily Carver, a commentator, a woman of the world, man about town, woman about town I suppose I should say, of indeterminate gender. Mark Dolan also here, drive time host this week of Talk Radio, but also man of many parts. Shall we start off with you, Emily? There's been lots of plankery this week. I mean, it just gets ridiculous. People keep tweeting me saying, you might have to start doing this every day.
Now, my first nomination is Prince Harry. I normally go for Meghan because she winds me up so much, but this time it's got to be Harry, or, formerly known as Prince Harry.
Yes.
I guess he's no longer known as that in most of the country's eyes. But
I call him the Duke of Netflix.
How much are they getting paid for that?
Well, I'm not sure, but I mean, until they said they were going to do a reality show, I thought they're not going to make much money now. But the reality show of sort of, at home with the Kardashians, starring Meghan and Harry, I mean, they might make a bit of money out of that.
Well, I mean, I'm one of the saddos who will watch it, even though I despise them. But anyway, the reason...
His legal status has changed because he was officially prince. Now he's just hostage.
Yes.
I mean, watching those videos in which, he's dead behind the eyes. He's clearly trapped in some kind
He's also dead between the ears.
Imagine them sort of rehearsing the lines before he goes live, because she's always looking up at him like, yes, very good.
I love when she looks at him like this.
That's exactly it. I mean, he might be in love.
Scared for him.
I mean, I would be worried. If someone's looking at me like that, I'd be going, I'm out of here.
Well, that's it.
That's why I said, when they built the wall around their last house, that wasn't to keep people out. That was to keep him in.
Of course it was.
In case he escaped.
No, I think we're going to have to send in the SAS and get the poor guy out at some point.
But anyway, the reason why he's my plank of the week this week, or at least a nomination, is because of the interview he did with the Evening Standard.
Oh, yes.
With his lovely wife, Meghan.
In order to protect his own privacy, of course. He gives another interview.
Anyway, what did he talk about? He called for an end to structural racism in the UK.
Yeah, we're all for that.
He said that the world was made by white people for white people, which I thought sounded a little bit racist, to be honest.
Quite racist,
I don't remember that in the Book of Genesis.
Also, he's actually been to Africa, right? It's not that white in Africa. If he thinks that the white people made Africa, he's really not getting that one right, is he?
No, and also as a member of the royal family, he has benefited somewhat from the kind of imperialist history of this country.
He really has.
So it's a bit late for an apology now.
It really is.
I know, he's so representative of the sort of self-loathing, the Brit, which is bizarre coming from a royal. But anyway, he also decided to talk about London and how it's not diverse if you happen to walk down the road. Or you don't notice its diversity. I was like, what planet are you living on?
Or maybe just walking down King's Road.
Yeah, no, I think
Even then, you find King's Road's quite diverse, to be honest. I mean, I don't think there's any part of London that you would describe as not diverse. Maybe inside the walls of Buckingham Palace is not very diverse.
I think that's about it. And Meghan, of sure as hell, doesn't know, does she?
She really doesn't. I mean, she really has completely ruined him. I mean, in a way, we've all had friends who have fallen victim to the wrong kind of girlfriend, right?
Oh, yes.
And you always end up having the same conversation with them, years later. I don't know what I was thinking, I don't know why. I'm really sorry. I'm sorry that we didn't invite you to the wedding. I'm sorry we couldn't get you, over for dinner. I can't believe I was with her for so long. It's all that. And that's the conversation he's going to be having with his mates at some point.
But I think Trevor Phillips described him perfectly in a column for The Times. He said he sounds like a sort of 1980s Polytechnic professor who's trying to get his head around what structural racism means.
Right.
But I think the British public is so sick of this sort of, I don't know what you'd call it. It's just these sort of gibberish that these people are coming out with all the time.
He's living in America now. Now, if he walks out onto Hollywood Boulevard, he might find that there's quite a lot of structural racism in America. Yeah. So maybe he should address himself to that. Maybe she should address herself to inviting her dad round for Christmas so that he can actually meet his first grandson.
Well, that'd be nice,
before she starts lecturing us on,
do you know
family values.
If you've been to, the Costa del Sol or other parts of Southern Europe, but all Harry has become is just another embarrassing expat.
It's true.
That's actually true.
People that...
Only he's not having egg and chips in the Cafe Del Mar.
No, that wouldn't be allowed. That's not vegan enough, is it? Let's be honest. But I think, he's there and he's lobbing these grenades in our direction from the luxury of his Hollywood mansion, and it's just not a good look. It's actually very, very sad, and I honestly don't know what has happened to this guy. It feels like his audience is not the world, it's not the UK, it's not black people or white people, it's that rather controlling woman sat next to him at all times, you know. And he's just desperate to please her and say all of the right things, and it cannot go on forever.
They really can't.
You know, he has paid such a price already, both in terms of his own popularity, his position within the royal family, his constitutional role. And by the way, he's also seems to have lost his brother as well, which is the ultimate price.
And his sense of humour. You know, that one thing that holds all British people together, which is that we are very good at taking the mickey out of each other and ourselves, and we see the funny side. But he's done that thing, and this happens to a lot of friends of mine who went and lived in America, as I did, married American women. They suddenly lost their sense of humour.
That's exactly it. He's completely lost his sense of humour. And what was so jarring about this particular interview was that it came out on the same day as it was being reported that only 9% of white underprivileged kids were going to university.
Right.
And you know, they'd showed that actually ethnic minorities are doing better in that respect in a lot of cases. And it was just like, Harry, just actually look at where we are in this country and stop trying to tear people apart.
And also, by the way, where did you think you got the right, having come from the privileged background that you came from, having never done a job of work in your life, right, to have only really known privileged people and hung about in bougies, you know, every single night of the week, picking up, you know, young Chelsea socialites called Chelsea. You know, what does he know? What right does he have to lecture us?
Definitely. And also, can we just put paid to all of these sweeping statements about an entire country being sort of systemically racist?
Yes.
I think there's a real problem with that. We all loathe racism. It is the most evil thing. And it exists everywhere. But I think the danger is that if you call everybody racist, then you will enrage some people who are not racist or don't think themselves to be racist, who then somehow strangely might become more xenophobic as a result of being told they're a racist.
It's like the word fascist, isn't it? It just gets thrown around willy-nilly. Yeah. It means nothing now.
Right. It's absolutely true. And you can't do anything more than to completely and utterly make the word irrelevant now, because there's no point in anyone using it anymore, because actual real racists are the same apparently as I am. I mean, I've been called racist by people who think that because I criticised Meghan Markle.
Have you lived if you haven't been called racist?
But the strange thing is this narrative of calling decent people who are not racist is that's great news for the far right.
Yeah.
And that is great news for the true racists who would like to organise and mobilise and create division in our society. This is music to their ears.
Absolutely right. Who's your first nomination?
I've got Nicola Sturgeon.
It's got to be done.
Who I realise...
She made it last week as well, so it's two in a row for her.
She's a candidate for life president of Planks of the Week, isn't she?
Yeah, she really is.
There should be an effigy of her on that back wall there.
I'm surprised there isn't a statue that's already been erected in the middle of Butte Square or whatever it is, where she does Butte House, you know.
Now, she's an extremely skillful politician. She is a little bit like the surgeon that's going to tell you that she's going to chop your legs and arms off and you should be grateful for it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the best thing they can do.
It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, her messaging around coronavirus has just been non-stop bad news for the economy, for the containment of the virus, which has not been great in Scotland at all. Lots of tragic deaths.
Worse care home results than ours in England.
There you go. So she, it hasn't been a result, but the messaging and the communication has. Boris, take note. However, she is now considering inflicting upon the good Scottish people a second national lockdown, a circuit breaker for 2 weeks.
Friday at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, fantastic. Apparently. Right. And it is devastating. Now, first of all, if this manoeuvre doesn't save the union, nothing will. Because if she goes out on a limb and has this lockdown, inflicts more damage on the Scottish economy, the livelihoods and health of the Scottish people, then that's great news for Boris Johnson and unionists everywhere. And history will judge her very harshly. She's having a good coronavirus at the moment because she's quite a good public speaker.
But I'm not sure. I mean, she's a bit like Donald Trump, is Nicola Sturgeon. I mean, people who really, really like the SNP and independence are very much in love with her. She can do no wrong. But actually, there's a middle ground of sort of floating voters who are quite keen on independence, but who are now going off her at a rate of knots because of what she's doing.
I just think the way that she is threatening the Scottish people every day with more and more restrictions, tighter restrictions, and the way she talks about it as if, she's in total control of their lives, and it's quite frightening because she's definitely got a strong authoritarian streak to her. Yeah. She's like a little despot.
Oh, she loves it. Yeah.
And she just loves it.
To be president.
Can you imagine if she were president of Scotland, which must be her dream? God knows what she'd do.
Yeah, she's the ultimate bureaucrat. She is a sort of the head librarian of all Scotland.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I used to know her actually quite well. You know, we used to drink champagne together in Regano's in Glasgow. Yeah, because she was part of the SNP when Alex Salmond was the leader. She was Glasgow representative. I was the editor of a newspaper up there. You know, we had a couple of dinners. She was very funny, actually. But I don't know what's happened to her. You know, there was a time when we would still exchange the odd message. That's all gone. It hasn't happened for about 2 years, you know. And she's clearly gone mad. She's become power crazed.
Well, that's right.
And she started to believe all her own publicity.
If you are a politician at this moment in time, you need to not be thinking in the moment. You need to look at the bigger picture. You need to look a year from now and imagine the state that your economy will be in and whether or not history has proven you to have been correct on the science of COVID. So if we talk about this circuit breaker, this second lockdown, the idea is to buy more time. Buy more time for what? For the virus to kick off again.
Right.
Further into the cold winter months, possibly adding to the pressure on the NHS
also,
should people have symptoms.
The one thing we know, right, is that the lockdowns don't work. You know, I've been repeating this ad nauseum for the past week, that 11 out of the 16 local lockdown places in Britain where it's been done have actually increased their infection rate by a factor of 2. So they've doubled, right? So it doesn't actually work. There's no point to it. But they keep saying things like, we don't want to do it, but it's the only alternative.
Yeah.
Well, I think obviously it's not, is it?
I think Mrs. Sturgeon has gifted Boris Johnson an opportunity to pivot on COVID-19, to recalibrate. And yes, you know, I don't think, to use his terms, that we should let rip with the virus. But what we do need to do is take that exclusive tunnel vision focus of COVID-19 onto the wider plane of the health of the economy, because we know if you crash the economy into a brick wall, you create poverty, and poverty kills.
So this is why we actually need an opposition who are willing to actually stand up for civil liberties and for the economy. A left-wing opposition should be thinking about the economy, should be thinking about jobs, should be thinking of the working class, and they're not. All they're doing is going along with whatever restrictions Boris Johnson says, and their only advice is go harder, go longer. You know, it's literally, it's infuriating. And the way Nicola Sturgeon has treated students is just outrageous. Just lying to them and then changing the goalposts and infuriating.
Somebody put out a list of SNP failings the other day, and it was endless. You know, all the way back to the exam results, which are handled worse by John Swinney than ours were by Gavin Williamson, which is saying something, by the way, right? But just ridiculous. And there's no opposition in Scotland at all. I mean, you might say Sir Keir Starmer's not very good, but there's no one in Scotland.
You know,
I don't even know the name of the guy who's in the Tory party who's running it at the moment. You know, Ruth Davidson's moved off to the House of Lords.
Douglas Ross. Is
that his name?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, you know,
there's the guy. Let's not forget the guy who was about to do the budget. And was then forced to resign on account of having sent some rather unsavoury texts to a 16-year-old boy. You know, I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah, Scotland deserves better.
I think so.
It's a shocking thing.
Really wish I was still back working for the Mirror up there.
You would have so much fun. I mean, locking up students, as you say, was an absolute disgrace.
Crazy.
And I can tell you, I spent 4 happy years as an undergraduate at the University of Edinburgh. I would not want to be locked up in the Pollock halls of residence, because I can tell you they're very uncomfortable, and it's a very narrow bed, which absolutely gave me merry hell with my lower back.
Locked up with, but that's another story.
Well,
that's true.
There was barely enough space for me. Look at the size on me.
True.
Did you fit in the bed, uni?
It'd be like a crane fly, sort of, you know, squeezed
Luckily,
around.
Mike, I never had to test the dimensions of that bed.
Thankfully. Thanks enough information about that. Thank you very much. I'll check
so slightly.
I'll check the Leith Police later. I'm going to go for another Scot. Margaret Ferrier has to be in there, even though it happened a while ago. It happened last week. It was last Monday, in fact, I think, so over a week ago. But this is the SNP MP, who's still, by the way, an MP. You know, she hasn't resigned because apparently there's no mechanism by which she can be forced to leave her job. Well, why not? Is what I want to know. You know, Nicola Sturgeon has basically told her to resign. Ian Blackford has, as far as I know, just suspended her from the parliamentary party. So she's now technically no longer an SNP MP. She's an independent. But there is no mechanism, apparently, for her to have to leave office. Now, it might be that there's a police investigation which finds some reason to charge her with something. And at that point, surely she would have to be recalled. But this is a woman who woke up one morning, decided that she felt a bit unwell and thought she might have coronavirus. So what did she do? She didn't immediately go to a testing centre. Instead, she decided to get on a train and travel all the way down to London. And then she thought, I feel a bit better now, so maybe I'll just go into the House of Commons. But before that, maybe I'll get a test just to make sure I'm okay. And so she gets the test done, doesn't get the result straight away, goes into the House of Commons, meets a few people, I believe goes into the chamber, you know, has some tea with some people, then comes back out, realises that her test is positive, so decides not to stay in the flat or the house where she is in London, which we pay for. She decides to get another train. Before that, I think she went to church, she went to a gym. She went literally, I mean, talk about super spreader. This woman has been everywhere. Now, you might say, well, so what? You know, maybe nobody will die. as a result of what she did. But if the SNP is going to be telling people, like students, to not move a muscle literally for 2 weeks, they're going to lock down every single bar in Glasgow and Edinburgh and Aberdeen and tell people they can't make any money. But this woman can get to travel around as much as she likes and do whatever she likes without fear or favour. It's extraordinary to me.
Yeah, and this is a woman who I remember was calling very loudly for Dominic Cummings to go, which was picked up by the press this week as well. Just the hypocrisy.
He's absolutely right. There must surely be, or we must get and sort of pressure them to bring in some form of sanction by the parliamentary powers that be.
Yeah.
I understand the premise of saying, well, you're technically elected by your constituents, but actually in the system we have, that's not true, because she wouldn't have been elected if she wasn't standing for the SNP.
Well,
Had she been standing as an independent, she wouldn't have got in.
I beg to differ. I actually rail against the cancel culture, and because I really regret the fact that
I certainly don't want her to be,
no, I don't like
pulled up by the
fact
police.
that if somebody makes a mistake or a misjudgment, that they should automatically lose their job. So therefore, to avoid the risk of hypocrisy, I'm going to say it's a matter of honour for her to stand down.
But she clearly has no honour. It's now a week later, and she's still there.
Possibly so.
So, Neil, I'm afraid your system, while admirable, is useless.
Well, that's it. But I suppose what you would want is certainly a sincere apology. I mean, I think she has spoken
I would be less concerned if she was not being paid by the public purse, but she is. So therefore, three of us and others are contributing to not only her very well upholstered salary, but also her expenses. I assume we're paying for a second home in London, for example.
I think she should quit, but I don't think she should be obliged to quit. Ultimately, we live in a democracy, and the good news is that in 4 years' time, she's toast.
Yeah, but how can you be in a job where you can't be fired? Name me any other job. I can't think of one.
If you've broken the law, I mean, ultimately, she will have to pay some enormous fine, potentially, and there is a Met police investigation.
Jeremy Corbyn got away with it, didn't he?
Yeah. Very, very true.
He didn't get a fine.
No, and we didn't know that he had more than 6 friends. So,
well, apparently they weren't friends. They were all working on some Maoist film project.
Because I don't know if I speak for anyone else.
Is that right?
No, I don't know. I've just made that up.
I don't know if I speak for anyone else in the country.
Like to see that.
What are you laughing at?
The Maoist film project. So it's going to be good, isn't it?
Oh, it's got to be.
Yeah.
It's going to be very entertaining.
Jeremy Corbyn as Chairman Mao.
Yeah, wouldn't be too much of a stretch, I don't think.
No, it wouldn't be very much of a stretch at all. But yeah, I don't know if I speak for many other people apart from myself, but I'm so tired of these stories about this MP having, not stayed within the rules on this occasion, and then this person. I just don't know if I have any outrage left, because I just think that the rules are just so over the top.
I think you're right.
I just want to go back to normal.
Yeah.
But the hypocrisy winds me up, but also the faux outrage from the sort of commentariat also winds me up so much.
Listen, I take that point, and you're right, because the rules are ridiculous, but these are the people that are making us
and the
do
SNP
them.
is so controlling.
And the SNP is very controlling. So you have to, you cannot make rules for one group of people and then not follow them at all. And it's not as if, I was not that bothered about what Dominic Cummings did, not because I support Dominic Cummings, because I don't. I think he's a bit weird, to be honest. But this woman didn't just get in a car and drive her family somewhere. She went on 2 separate trains. She went to her place of work. She went to a church. She went to a gym. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a slightly different kettle of fish.
And actually, I consider myself to be a lockdown skeptic. I think there is a scientific case to answer for the national lockdown that we had in March. I'd love a cost-benefit analysis of, by the time we get to the end of the pandemic, was it worth all of that economic destruction? Was it worth shutting down the National Health Service and turning it into the National COVID Service? And those are all questions that will rightly be up for grabs, post-pandemic. And of course, as you know, I'm not that keen on masks. But this woman has crossed the line, even if you're a lockdown skeptic, because she has essentially known that she had COVID-19 and she's gone about her daily life, and that is deeply wrong.
Absolutely right. Time for your second nominee.
So my second nominee is an actor, Dominic West.
Ah, yes.
Who probably best known for starring in The Wire, I believe.
Possibly.
I haven't really watched it.
He was brilliant in The Wire as well. It's such a shame, because I thought there's 2 people in The Wire who you think are American. One is Idris Elba, who plays a drug dealer, and the other one is Dominic West, who plays this kind of slightly mad Irish-American drunk police officer. And they're both brilliant, and they both sound American. And you watch it and you think, these guys are brilliant. They're American. They're not.
Well, all these actors end up letting us down, don't they, when they engage in politics. Anyway, he went live on Good Morning Britain and couldn't contain his excitement or delight at the fact that President Trump had gone down with coronavirus. I think he said, I did slightly leap in the air with joy.
And do you know
he
what was the
said.
worst thing about it? Was he was saying it to Kate Garraway.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And Kate Garraway's husband is in a coma practically and has been since about March and is at death's door. And she's in bits about that.
And I don't know if he knew that or if he just, as I said, couldn't contain himself. It was just so, I think it was beyond Plankish, to be honest. Plank is probably letting him off a bit lightly. But
I mean, it shows you how idiotic these people are.
Yeah, I mean, they're so idiotic. And it was, I think, another person who I nominated for a Plank at some point was Miriam Margolyes, who did exactly the same thing when it came to Boris Johnson. Except I think she wished death upon him.
Right.
But the problem is that these people are so immune from being sort of cancelled or losing their gigs with the BBC or with Netflix or whatever, because, they're taking the sort of, the fashionable view, right? Imagine if that was a Tory who'd say, I wish, I don't know, or if it was Keir Starmer who'd come down with coronavirus and they'd said, I wish him dead or I leapt with joy. It just wouldn't happen.
No.
And if it did, they'd be, they'd be told off.
It's just horrific. And he was one of the more sort of, I would suppose, high-profile people because he appeared on TV and said it. But there's another woman who I spotted who I hadn't heard of before called Zahra Rahim, who is a former Hillary Clinton sort of campaign manager. She would have been, as it was pointed out to me, if Hillary Clinton had won 4 years ago, she would have been in the White House. She would have been part of the Hillary Clinton team. She actually did wish him dead. She wrote a tweet that said, "Do you know what? I hope he dies."
On a human level, it's cruel, but it's actually anti-democratic as well, because in the end, Donald Trump achieved an astonishing, unprecedented, surprising victory in 2016. He might just do it again in 2020. And I'm not comfortable with this abuse of any public figure. Boris has had it. Jeremy Corbyn had it. Lots of people have had it. And I think that we have to call off the dogs and start to actually support anybody that's been elected. So I didn't like Jeremy Corbyn, but if he'd won the election, I would have got behind the project because we live in a democracy.
I wouldn't have. I'd have left the country. Might have gone to Scotland.
I would have definitely emigrated because you figure this building would have been shut down for a start. There'd be no work here because I'm afraid the media you didn't like would have been shut down because it would have been like Pravda.
All of those lefties that said that they were going to leave the country, they haven't, have they? No. Since Boris Johnson was here.
The trouble also now, and you've illustrated it well, is that you don't have to either get behind or hate. There is a middle ground where you can disagree with the politics of a person or be indifferent, but not hate them.
And you don't defeat your opponents by hoping they'll die. That's
the difference between Jeremy Corbyn and I is that Jeremy Corbyn hates me because of the job that I do and who I work for. I don't hate Jeremy Corbyn. I just think he's a massive plank. And I'm very glad he didn't become Prime Minister. And he was useless as a leader of the Labour Party. I don't hate the guy.
It looks like Trump has had the last laugh, though, doesn't it? It seems like he's recovered.
Yeah, exactly.
He's beat the virus, so good for him.
Here's the other thing, which is, in some ways, I don't know if there's a little bonus point for somebody that's not a plank, but I had to agree with Donald Trump when he said that we shouldn't be so afraid of COVID-19 and get on with our lives.
Well,
and I thought, amen to that.
Well, nobody criticised Rishi Sunak for saying it.
Yeah.
But apparently Trump can't say it. It's like Trump's the only person that can be blamed for getting coronavirus. You wouldn't go to anyone else who's ever been infected with the disease and say, it's your fault. You got it because you're completely reckless and you didn't think about how dangerous this was. Why?
Well, that's right. I mean, we honestly have not had a proper debate around the COVID measures, and that's a deep concern.
Well, we may have that coming up. We may have that coming up here on Plank of the Week because it's time for your second nomination.
I will offer you Boris Johnson.
There we are.
Prime Minister.
So now it's time for that debate.
Yeah. If it had been written in the Conservative Party manifesto in December 2019 that we would all be locked up for months on end, not be able to meet our families under various circumstances, have our businesses closed down, have jobs disappear, and borrow, upwards of £500 billion, based upon what is debatable science at best, if not wrong science, as is emerging, then he obviously would not have had his landslide victory. Now, in fairness,
I think it's a bit unfair to blame him for the coronavirus that came out of Wuhan,
well,
China.
I think we can blame him for the measures. Now, early doors, it's not a problem. We all accepted the lockdown in March. The virus didn't have a name last year. But as time has gone by, first of all, we were told it was a few weeks just to kind of, save the NHS, to make sure it wasn't overwhelmed. And it has gone on and on and on. And now we won't even be celebrating Christmas. And I'm just disappointed that this free-spirited, enterprising, libertarian figure in Boris Johnson has betrayed all of his own values. By listening to this echo chamber of scientists that he's got at number 10, who are the prophets of doom and gloom in the forms of Whitty and Valence, but also not doing his job. If you're Prime Minister, you have to be 360. You have some of your time is devoted to COVID-19 and the pandemic, but you must think about the economy. You must think about undiagnosed other illnesses, which are piling up. And in the end, I think it's dereliction of duty, and I think he's a worthy candidate for Plank of the Week.
I think he has been worthy for about the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think so. And what's so frustrating for those who are, well, libertarian-minded like myself, is the fact that we know Boris Johnson. We know what he was like as a journalist. He was so freedom-minded. Can you imagine what he'd be writing right now if he was still writing for The Spectator, still writing for The Telegraph?
Yeah.
He'd be sticking the boot in. He'd be, let's get rid of this lockdown, let people live, let them make their own decisions. And that's what we need. We don't need this regulation of our lives. Just let people make their own decisions, look after the vulnerable, 100%. And get on with it.
But in his speech today, he made the first kind of reference to his own experience, didn't he? Because he said, you know, some people out there are saying it's because of my brush with death that I've become this completely different individual. Then started spousing on about how he was not completely different and he was exactly the same. And I mean, it sounded quite good at the beginning, but then he kind of went off on this weird tangent of, you know, something out of what's that movie what's his name? The TV, the movie about the guy who's living inside a TV show.
Oh, the Truman Show.
The Truman Show. It was like something out of the Truman Show where he's talking about people just cycling around happily, very undivided nation. You know, everybody's having a great time. Everybody's thin. You know, they've all got great broadband, and there's a load of windmills floating around in the sea.
What we're going to do? We've had all of these businesses that closed down, all these jobs that are gone. It's no problem. We're going to have new businesses and new jobs.
Right.
And I took a caller to drive yesterday who actually called me out on not challenging my guest on that particular issue. He's like, well, wait a minute. I'm a painter and decorator. How am I going to retrain for something else?
Yeah,
it's not that simple.
Well, he's not going to just suddenly be able to start becoming a marine engineer, planting you know, hundreds of turbines in the middle of the sea, you know, at a depth of 2,000 feet.
They're peddling a myth. They're peddling a lie. In fact, it's snake oil.
It's bollocks, is what it is. I'm afraid there's no other word for it. You know, and it's just not believable.
Bolloxios.
Yeah, exactly right.
This diet stuff just winds me up so much. So he's lost 26 pounds. Well, whoop-de-doo for you.
Yeah, well
Doesn't mean the whole nation needs to have their sugar taxed.
Maybe you can bring out the Boris Johnson cookbook for for Christmas.
You can just imagine it, him and Carrie, just sort of.
Can I just say
how to make a vegan cake?
I think Boris has gone downhill since the weight loss. I think we should bring back Fat Boris.
He doesn't look great, I have to say. I mean, he still looks kind of haunted. I think he has got that long COVID they talk about. He doesn't appear to be particularly healthy, even though he's now threatening to sort of arm wrestle anybody that wants to have a go. It's like, just get on with running the country and have a drink.
Following on from our conversation about Donald Trump, we wish him well, and thank goodness he got through his awful health ordeal.
Well, we hope he's got through it. He may still have a bit of time to go.
And there's two things to say.
This doesn't come out till tomorrow.
If he doesn't have the appetite, like if he's lost faith with high office, or if he doesn't feel well enough, then he has a duty to stand down and let someone else do that job. And there's a guy next door, very nimble-footed, and who has had a good coronavirus, if you can have such a thing, which is Rishi Sunak. So many of his economic innovations have come off, possibly been too successful in the case of Eat Out to Help Out, because cases have gone up. But I think what we're talking about here is leadership. His political hero is Winston Churchill. Now, how did Winston Churchill...
That's getting a bit tired now, isn't it?
Well, I know it is.
I mean, he's about as much like Winston Churchill as I am.
Correct.
You know, he might as well stop saying it.
Yeah, no, that's right. He's more like the Churchill dog from the Insurance House.
That's too easy, too easy. You know, I'm not letting you away with that.
Exactly.
That's a comedian.
That was hack. That was hack comedy.
Yeah.
Well, do you know why, you see? Because the comedy circuit's been shut for 6 months, so I've lost my touch. Use it or lose it.
Absolutely right.
That is. But let me just very importantly tell you that I think that if you look at what Churchill, his hero, did in defeating Hitler, it was.
He didn't go on a diet.
Well, the first thing he didn't do is he didn't conduct a. No,
he didn't turn up and go, "Great news! I've lost 24 pounds." Meanwhile, the Nazis are at Dover.
In fact, somebody should send a consignment of burgers and hot dogs over to number 10 so we can get the old Boris back.
Yeah.
And maybe
but
give
not
him
after 10 o'clock, because they'll be
Think
fine.
about that. Our Prime Minister is talking about his weight loss.
I know.
I mean, Jesus.
But. So,
you know, he'll probably Willoughby.
Yeah, he's going to do one of those. He'll be on one of those makeover segments on This Morning.
Just take a baby and look.
Well,
look at me.
Yeah. So do it.
But anyway, it's very important I get this point across, which is that what we saw with Churchill was that he was very brave as a wartime leader, and he made tough choices. And what he couldn't do is save every life.
Time as well, apparently.
Well, he was a bit. But in the end, some people question Churchill's legacy for the fact that many of the battles were rather ill-conceived, and there was an awful lot of perhaps unnecessary bloodshed. There's the debate around Dresden.
No, what battles without bloodshed now? Is
Well,
that the
there
new
you
thing?
go. Well, this is exactly
Dear
the point.
God.
And exactly,
What are they
Mike.
teaching people?
So what you've got is a prime minister who's trying to, I would say, deliver more or less a COVID zero strategy. And the
Which is
reason
unobtainable.
why it's unobtainable. Never in history have we tried to stop a virus before. Contain it, absolutely, like in Sweden, where they washed their hands and kept a distance. No face coverings, no lockdowns. Kept their schools, businesses open. They've seen an 8% correction in their economy. We've had 20% and the rest. He has to be brave, and he has to pivot now. His entire political career depends on it. If he doesn't change course and go for Sweden, then he will, well, I think he'll be gone within a year.
Okay, well, that's a bold prediction. You may well be right, but we shall see.
You may well be right.
We shall see. Well, we might all be gone by next year this time if nothing changes, because we'll have run out of food, we won't have any money, we'll be crawling around on the streets trying to figure out how to get by, because we don't have any fuel either,
Well, do you know what's interesting, actually? This focus on COVID-19 and the tragic death toll, that's actually where the politics are, because in the end, what Hancock and Johnson are thinking is that their entire legacy and how they'll be judged by history is on that figure of the COVID death toll.
Yeah.
So in fact,
which isn't even accurate.
Well, no. So we're actually all sort of bystanders, passengers, not in the management of health crisis, but a political project. COVID-19 has become the political project of Boris Johnson, and we are all hostages to that fortune.
It's true.
I agree.
I'm going to go with an old foe of mine, The Guardian, for my second one.
Excellent.
Because
Are they still going?
They are still going. They might as well stop producing the newspaper, though, because it has fewer sales than the first hour of my show, quite frankly. And so what they do, though, is they put loads of stuff out which is not actually fit to go in the paper, and it goes out online, because they have got a massive online presence, right? It still doesn't make any
huge.
actual money, because they're an operation, of course, which doesn't pay any tax, because they're the Scott Trust, and they don't need to pay any tax because they're do-gooders, right? But they put out a list today of the top 100 black people, and it includes people like Monroe Bergdorf, who is a transgender model and artist. I mean, I don't know much about Bergdorf. I know I used to know a shop in America called Bergdorf Goodman's, where I bought a couple of nice shirts and some nice suits. But they haven't put in Sir Trevor McDonald, right? Who you'd have to say is one of the great advantages of British sort of, life, isn't he?
Yeah,
I mean, he's one of the
100%.
guys that was one of the most famous news. I think he was the first black newsreader for ITN.
Yeah.
He was famous for his sign-offs. He was famous for his, sort of, I don't know, the sort of the solemnness that he brought to reading the news.
Definitely.
And then after that, he did some very good documentaries.
Correct.
He's not in it. Ainsley Harriott is also not in it.
Yeah.
Because apparently he's not either black enough
One of the original TV
left-wing
chefs.
enough, one of the first black TV chefs, and
Yeah.
still on television,
And
still entertaining
I've
people.
got an Ainsley Harriott waffle iron at home, and it's a great bit of kit.
what?
A waffle iron.
I bet it is.
What is
Yeah.
that?
I mean,
A
that
waffle
doesn't
iron.
get you onto Great Britain's nothing
Yeah,
will.
well, you know what waffles are, don't you?
Yeah.
Waffles are, it's
Oh, you call it a
waffle
waffle iron?
So it's like how you use a waffle iron to make waffles. Anyway, that's enough of that.
Irrelevant.
Trevor
I'm a
Phillips,
self-employed
Trevor Phillips, who
entertainer.
you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier, he's not in it either.
You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of, sorry to go back to Meghan, I'm not obsessed. The Vogue cover that she did.
Yes.
And she chose her, top 10 women?
Yeah.
And they were all, very minor,
Right.
like, transgender
Like Margaret Thatcher wasn't
models
in there.
and things.
You
No,
wouldn't
no.
expect her to be. But, the other thing
Like,
that's
list the
annoying me
major
here is
ones.
Dawn Butler is also in as one of the 100 top black Britons. And I mean, Dawn Butler, I'm afraid, whether you like her or don't like her, she's only really famous for one thing, and that's for getting caught in a video sort of scenario, making her own video trying to make out the police had
Oh
been
my God.
victimising her. And then nothing happened because the police hadn't done anything wrong.
Yeah, and
And
where
you
she,
just
where
think,
she really went wrong is that she didn't release the whole video. She released a
Right.
portion of the video, so it's impossible for us to give her a fair hearing on this one if we don't have all the evidence.
Yeah. So
But,
this is the usual
you know,
Guardian twisting of the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, make up your own list if you like, but don't make out that it is a definitive list, which they're doing because they're doing it under the auspices of the Guardian masthead. It's not like Owen Jones, who was on it last week as Plank of the Week. It's not like Owen Jones's top 100 black Britons, but it's just ridiculous.
I would question why they're doing it at all.
Yeah.
Why should we be having lists of people based on their race or gender, as in the case of Meghan. I'm just sick of it. I think people are sick of it. Let's just have top 100 Britons.
Yeah.
Do we want people from different ethnicities to feel 100% British?
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. But this
and
is
you could
the trouble.
easily fill that list
It's infuriating.
with amazing black British people.
Exactly.
But what you don't have to do is create this tokenism, which somehow is strangely, although it perhaps comes from the right place, is very divisive and probably will backfire.
It probably will, because you can imagine.
People.
Yeah, it does annoy people, but they don't care if they annoy what they call the wrong people. Like Lord Boateng, who was one of the first black ministers in any government. You know, he's not in it either, because obviously he's from the wrong side of the political divide.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And that's the worry about these lefties.
Are any of the black politicians in it?
What, you mean apart from Dawn Butler?
Apart from Dawn Butler.
I think they've missed out Diane Abbott as well. But I mean, Diane Abbott, as I was told by Esther Cracker earlier on today, should be in it because she was one of the first black MPs, black female MPs, and that is actually something to be proud of. But I don't think Dawn Butler's going to be proud
she was actually a trailblazer.
Yeah, exactly right. So I'm afraid The Guardian, straight on the plank list. They haven't been on it for a while. I managed to avoid ripping it up today just because I thought, because I couldn't find it in the paper. That was the only reason.
Yeah.
So back to
only online.
back to your final nomination.
It's going to get really expensive because they'll stop having a print run and you'll have to break a laptop every time.
So it's sort of similar to Mark's, but it's going to be Matt Hancock. But I'll give it a little different angle because I was going to go with how appalling the strategy has been. But I think what's been so plankish about it and what's actually affected me personally is the way that he's ramped up this hysteria and the public are buying into it and the public are scared, and I think they genuinely are scared, and it's brought out the most awful authoritarian tendencies in the public. The other day, as Mike mentioned on his show, I was standing in an outdoor platform totally on my own, sipping a coffee before my train arrived, out in the air, no one was there. Some woman makes a beeline for me, asks me very aggressively in my face whether I'm exempt. I say no, I'm waiting to, get on the train before I put my mask on. And she, calls me every name under the sun, and very aggressively. And I think this has happened before to me, less aggressively, but I think this is happening all over the country now because people are either scared or it's just brought out their authoritarian tendencies. And I think people like Matt Hancock and to a less extent Boris Johnson are so responsible for this. And also the mainstream media as well, people like Piers Morgan, who could be a plank this week too. But just whipping up this sort of...
Well, if you listen to another radio station which does not ever get mentioned by me, but I refer to it as the dark side, they have people actually saying, as presenters, well, of course it's the right thing to do to wear a mask. You got into trouble because you actually stood up to these, bullies who basically say that you must wear a mask. They have no idea whether you must wear a mask or not. They don't know if it does any good. Like you, I wear a mask if I'm on the London Underground, but I didn't used to wear it until I got on the train. Now I have to wear it from the moment I walk into the station. I don't use it anymore. I don't use the tube. I'm back in the car.
Other radio and television platforms sound like an extension of the Number 10 press office. And I can't believe,
so strange, isn't it?
And I'm very proud that at Talk Radio we're outliers in being willing to have a discussion about all of the COVID measures. And the face coverings is interesting because it has created a lot of social division. And I think the face coverings have just got too much of a free pass. And I think the reason why is because there is an almost ideological attachment, a sort of religious fervour for face coverings now, among a portion of the population that see it as the ultimate act of virtue signalling. I'm trying to save lives.
Which was finally sort of, peak craziness was when Donald Trump came out for his little drive-by with all the Secret Service agents who are they're all wearing masks. They're in a hermetically sealed car, which is bulletproof, which also has all sorts of screens between drivers and the passengers and all of that. Also, by the way, the Secret Service, whose job is to get in the way of a bullet if the president actually gets shot at, right? And suddenly, despite the fact they're all wearing masks, all the virtue signalers are going, oh, he's put them all in danger. To which I said, well, if they're all wearing masks, how can they be in danger? Well, maybe the masks don't work.
I think so. We weren't wearing masks at the peak of this pandemic when the R rate was so high.
Yeah, and what happened is we weren't wearing face coverings and the numbers went down and down and down. And I, by the way, I'm the ultimate sheep in that I wear a mask probably in more places than I have to. But I want us to debate all of the measures. Well, maybe it's quite an improvement, as you'll agree. But in the end, we need to debate. We live in a democracy. We have free speech. And I think that Matt Hancock's hysteria around COVID-19, his focus, because all he's thinking about is his job. He's the health secretary. So in many ways, all credit to him for worrying about COVID. But then other ministers like Rishi Sunak is thinking about the economy, and therefore he's a little more hawkish when it comes to the lockdown measures.
But he said if we allow COVID to rip through the country again, hundreds of thousands of people will die.
Madness.
Think of the people who are sat at home who are genuinely anxious about this.
Right.
Like, we're quite, relaxed and free thinking in this respect, but there are so many people who take this all at face value, are looking at these death toll figures being ramped up every day, and it's just, can we have some perspective? I don't know what they're playing at.
Perspective is what we need, and that's exactly right. When all the people were banging on about, oh my God, look, 1 million people have now died around the world. 60 million people die every year around the world. So that's 1 week, effectively, of death.
And the big thing is that you just have to understand that every COVID measure, even if you back it, comes at a price. And that is not in the national discourse at the moment. And we're not hearing it from the cabinet. So even the face coverings, if they work, which is a big if, we were told by months by Dr. Jenny Harries not to wear one. A new video today has emerged of Dr. Hilary Jones, a guy I respect and admire, GMTV, or no, what is it called? GMB doctor.
GMB now,
but there's him down the barrel of the lens in March, imploring people not to wear a mask because the virus is so tiny, it just passes through the holes in the mask. You'd need you basically would have to look like you were a Chernobyl road sweeper to actually be safe from COVID. And it raises a suspicion that perhaps the coverings and the lockdowns, it's about controlling people and about creating fear. And in the end, the people will fight back.
I think you're
feel
right.
Like that. I hope we do, but at the moment, the British public are seeming a bit docile and a bit sort of willing to accept anything.
I think they're getting more and more worked up, though. Who's your third one?
I'm going to offer you Lawrence Fox.
Oh, yes.
Who I would imagine
Who's
is
actually
probably
a friend of this parish,
Well,
so
there you go.
don't be too hard on him.
Exactly.
Don't be
I
too
think
hard on him.
probably a celebrated figure in the sort of universe of Planks to the Wind.
Yes.
And the reason why he's rightly celebrated is because
Lawrence. I think
he's an intelligent guy.
Yeah.
He's been very courageous. You could say he's put his career on the line. You could say he has thrown his career away.
Yeah, but
as an actor.
if you watch what he actually said on that night's Question Time, he said nothing that was
remarkable
anything but
at all.
innocuous. I mean, I'm thinking, have I got the wrong clip? Because I was going to talk to him again, I think, when he was coming to do a show with us.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'll just have another look at it and remind myself. And it was really innocuous, nothing at all that you would think anyone would get worked up about.
No.
And yet here he is, unemployable by any sort of acting fraternity, any acting organisation.
Definitely. He's been really brave and he has made a great contribution to the conversation around wokeism and cancel culture. And I actually ally myself to so much of what he's fighting for.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, a bit like the lockdown lunatics in Trafalgar Square who are cheering on David Icke and Piers Corbyn, I feel that he went a little too far this week.
Yeah.
He got on Twitter. I don't know if he was in vino veritas because you've got daytime Lawrence Fox
He
and
fell
then you've
into
got
the trap.
evening Lawrence Fox. And
Well,
I don't know
he also
whether-
fell into the trap. And I think since he's admitted, you can't really win with these people.
Correct.
If you start taking on the wokists, they will take you down.
That's it.
Because that's what they do.
Don't bother.
You know,
Correct.
it's
Correct.
really not worth fighting them.
No, exactly. And I think that he's done his cause a disservice by railing against a couple of online critics, calling them paedophiles. Now, he wasn't actually saying they were paedophiles. He was making a point.
He was making a point.
They were calling him racist, which he denied. And he's like, I might as well call you a
And
paedophile.
he's not a racist. I can tell you that from absolutely personal experience. You know?
No. Well, the bottom line is that everybody is allowed their opinion. However, I think that his judgment was found wanting this week, which is why I'm going to put him on the planks
I
list.
would be more comfortable making Sainsbury's plank of the week, actually. But, that's what he was getting worked up about.
Yeah.
Because they were creating safe spaces for black people, apparently virtually, once they get called out on it. Because everybody immediately, when they first read it, thought, does that mean you're creating spaces in your shops for black people? Oh, no, it was only virtually. And also you go, well, why are you doing that? What's the point? If people who feel vulnerable because of the colour of their skin, I don't think they're going to be looking on Sainsbury's website for a place to go, are they?
I mean, it's so infantilising and patronising, but I think you're right. He has been a bit of a plonker this week. I mean, he's
In the
launched
nicest
this new
possible way.
party, and it may have been a little sooner than he'd hoped, but launched this new party in the first week. He's seen calling people paedophiles on Twitter.
Right.
I mean,
But the thing
come
is,
on, Lawrence, you've got a good thing going.
And I know that you'll probably say it's his own fault, he's brought it on himself, but I think he may have been goaded into it, and that's what worries me slightly. So my apologies to Lawrence, but I'll accept your
But
nomination.
Sainsbury's are worse.
Yeah, Sainsbury's are also worse. Now, I'm going to go for something very unusual for my final planks of the week, because it's two women who went into a restaurant in St Andrews called Ziggy's, which I don't know. I don't know how well you know St
Not
Andrews.
familiar with Ziggy's?
No, it's
Doesn't
named
sound
after
like a very Scottish restaurant.
named
does
after
it?
my dog. It doesn't sound particularly Scottish, no. But these two women were Scottish. They had 2 kids with them. They went into this restaurant and they decided, like some people do, it'd be a great idea to try and get out without paying. So one of them takes the 2 kids and says, "Oh, I better take the kids out because they get a bit restless." Disappears off with the children. The other one then sits there on her own, asks for the Apple Pay. Apple Pay doesn't work, goes, "Oh, I'll have to go out and get some money from the cash machine. Is that all right?" Then just does a runner, right? So not probably something that many restaurants have had to deal with recently, but possibly it's something that you've seen people do in time. The trouble is that these 2 individuals, unfortunately, had left their details earlier due to the track and trace regulations.
Brilliant.
So not only did they have their phone numbers, but they also had their email addresses and their names. So they were able to call them.
Well, first of all, rare evidence that the track and trace system is worth having.
Well,
yeah, it's
let me
useless
put
for
it to you this
spotting
way.
COVID.
If they'd done it on the app, it probably wouldn't have worked.
Of course not.
This is the old-fashioned pen and ink scenario where you actually write it down on a piece of paper.
That's proper plankish
It
behaviour.
really is, isn't it? I mean, how thick do you have to be? And the great thing is the restaurant people had a great sense of humour about it because they actually posted it all on Facebook, right, without naming the people, and just told the whole story and said, "This is like something out of The Viz."
Yes,
because
it really
was.
is. It really
so
is.
absolute plankishness. I mean, I don't expect they'll win it, but I don't expect they'll be back in it ever again either.
No.
So we have now reached the point of no return, and I know you have to rush off and do something else, so we'll rush through the final bit. We've got 9. We need to get it to 3.
Wow.
So why don't you pick your favourite Mark Dolan plank? Emily?
Was it
Give her
Boris
the 3.
Johnson?
I've got Boris, Loza, and Nicola.
Oh, you know what? Was Boris on last week?
He wasn't in the final 3.
Okay, I'm going to go for Boris because he is. I wasn't impressed by his speech today.
Okay. So, Mark, you can pick Margaret Ferrier, The Guardian, or the St Andrews Thieves.
Well, crime never pays, so I'll take the St Andrews Thieves.
St Andrews
Because
Thieves.
hospitality has been through enough
It's
already
true.
without people
It's
paying
very
their
true.
bills.
Okay. And then I've got to pick your 3. What are your 3?
Yeah, so it was Dominic West, Prince Harry, or Duke of Sussex,
Oh,
whatever.
I think,
And what's the
before
other
you
one? Matt
mentioned the
Hancock.
third one, I think it's got to be Dominic West, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very timely.
Yeah.
That's a good 3, actually. So Dominic West, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, and the St Andrews Thieves. What do you reckon?
Bring it on. A bit of sweet poetic justice. I feel better having nominated those 3 this week.
Yes. I think Dominic West should get it, personally. Only because people thought that he wasn't a plank. He's a talented guy.
Yeah.
He may never be in it again.
Yeah.
I wonder
He
if he'll
proper
be.
messed up
I wonder
there.
if he will be blackballed in the same way that Lawrence Fox was, and he won't ever get any more work. Somehow I doubt
He'll
it.
get more work. He'll get more work.
Yeah.
He'll win an Oscar.
He'll be the next James Bond.
Yeah.
Yeah, he will.
No, I think you're right. I think that he's crossed the line with wishing death on
yeah.
somebody.
Well,
that's,
to be fair, he only jumped for joy. He didn't actually
Okay.
wish death,
All
but
right.
he also carries with him the guilt of all the others.
Yeah, let's do him. Let's do
Dominic West.
Dominic West.
And Boris is number 2.
I think so. I think that Boris, it's all very well making a good speech, but what you want from a general is not a good speech, a good strategy.
Yeah,
Yes, no strategy,
I
no
think
plan.
that's right. And Thick as Thieves is the number 3.
Yeah,
Very good.
that's just brilliant.
Well, thank you, everybody. Emily Carver and, of course, Mr. Mark Dolan. You'll be on all week this week on the Drive Time
Correct.
Show. Plank of the week, it is, of course, the one and only man who jumped for joy when he heard that Boris Johnson, when he heard that Donald Trump had been admitted to hospital for COVID. He jumped for joy. Dominic West, you're an absolute plank. Thank you very much indeed. We'll see you next week.